Well, welcome everybody. We are right at the top of the hour. I'm Jennifer Coffey from OSEP. I am the SPDIG program lead. And we also have Kelsey with us, who is organizing us. And she just also added the prompt to the chat. So please do let us know an accomplishment that you're excited to share. And then
That's
also
Jennifer
your
Coffey
state that you represent in your role.
from DC.
So did someone have a question? Good. Hi, Tom. Excellent. All right. You know, it's interesting because Rebecca has added piloting the school fidelity tool that they developed. And I think, you know, at some point in time, it would be great to have a conversation about the different fidelity tools people are using, just so everyone could share, get it out there, and then people could ask each other questions. Let me know if that's a conversation people would be interested in having. All right, great. Well, welcome again. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And the PowerPoint will be available on the event page. And again, Kelsey will send that out to you. Not having access to it. Okay. Sorry, my computer is frozen. Interesting. All right, let's try that again.
I have it up to Jennifer if it's helpful for me to share.
Oh, thank you. Let me try it one more time and then I'll alternate to that. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for the yes, Selena. I recognize your voice. All right, so this is our overview. Please do stop me to ask questions at any time. And Kelsey will let me know if there's anything in the chat. This is for you, not for me. So I really want to respect your needs and respond to them. So I'm going to start off with some helpful reminders, talk about the program measures and specifically some Government Performance Results Act considerations, and then talk about annual performance report how-tos. I've set this up so that the old salts in the room can stay for the first half or a little bit more, and then get off if they want to after that, because not everyone needs the annual performance report how-tos, the APRs. They are comfortable with it. So stay on for as much as you need. I will not take it personally. So helpful reminders. First of all, and not all these are real specific to the APR, but it comes along as part of the APR because of the timing of things, because the APR is how we decide continuation funding. And so part of that is your budget information that you include in it. So some budget considerations is expending your contracts and or subgrants.
This isn't for us. This is for Laura Bray.
So I think someone from Pennsylvania was just speaking. So please be sure to mute yourself. And it might not be for everyone. I don't know. But if it is for you, let's talk about expending the contract. So contracts and subgrants, please do be thinking about when your contracts and subgrants are going to be billing you, when they're going to be receiving the funds from you so that you can draw down in G5. So as early as possible in the fiscal year. So our fiscal year begins on October 1st. Typically your SPDIG, your fiscal year begins on October 1st. And it's called your performance year as well. Not every grant goes to October 1st to September 30th, but many grants do. So if that is the case, be thinking about, can I have contracts set up? You know, maybe they're a quarterly basis. So you don't just have one large amount that's going to be drawn down at the end of that fiscal year. There are lots of ways to set it up, but we look at your account multiple times, and a really key time is June and July. So if you have a large balance that could be spent down on that contract at that time, that could affect your continuation amount. So I'm gonna stop right there. That was a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions about that?
This is Kristen.
Yep.
Jennifer, so in our APR, because we just sent out RFAs
Mhm.
and they have until September to spend down their money. I'm guessing that we can just describe in the APR in the budget section when these things came out, how they're going to be implemented, and the time frame that they have to get reimbursements in.
Yep, that's exactly right. So I, in the middle, I talk about meeting regularly with your budget folks. So everyone in your office is on the same page. That might be also meeting with the contracts folks, it depends on what your office looks like, but you also might meet with the contracting group. They might have a budget person who you want to meet with as well. To the right of that is, how do you plan to spend down any unexpended funds? So in section B of your APR, you have a chance to say exactly what Kristen just said. Give a table with what you're planning to spend on which activities. You can make it just like the 524B form that you filled out with your application, which is the budget. But the more detail you can give about how you plan to spend down the funds, the more likely you are not to have a decrease in your continuation amount. It is an ongoing conversation. I know some of you have had challenging experiences with that, and it's not pleasant. But we try to get as much information from you as possible to then share with various offices in the department. So typically, if there's an argument for that you need this money to continue on, we try to make that argument to have your full continuation or close to it, to carry out those activities. Did that answer your question, Kristen?
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, other considerations. Have conversations with your project officer. This is a grant. It's a discretionary grant, not even a formula grant, discretionary grant. And that means that it's a conversation. It's not a contract. It's a conversation where you're figuring out how to get to the objectives you set out in your grant application. And maybe that's changing due to COVID, due to other factors. And so it's a conversation with your project officer if you want to change something about what you're doing. And then you all will decide together. They will need to give you the ultimate approval to make any changes, but we understand that it's not necessarily going to be exactly what you set out in your application. So with agreement with your project officer, there are possibilities to change your performance measures, your activities, and your budget. So it's something to think about. Something that I've been talking with my projects about when they have maybe money that they didn't spend as they had planned, or they are not able to carry out the activities just as they had planned. So it's a changing context, but first let's go back to, what did you ultimately want to accomplish here? So is there another way of getting to that goal other than the one that you laid out previously? And maybe just dream big for a little while, brainstorm, blue sky it. What's possible here? And what are some innovative strategies you could take to get there? And are you lacking on resources? There's something that you would like to accomplish that there just isn't a resource for, or you feel like you're going to have to create a resource for it. Please do connect with your project officer about it, because it's possible that one of our TA centers has already created that resource. And this is a professional development grant, not necessarily a materials grant, a resource, so we want you all working with people as much as possible, and changing adult behavior, improving strategies that are used by adults to improve child outcomes. So if there's a resource that's already living and available, we would love for you all to be able to use that. But first, we got to know what you're looking for. And then, are you involving your stakeholders as much as you could? I talk sometimes with my projects about a grant program from the Department of Justice and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And they were mayor's grants. And the stakeholders who needed to be involved with those were so extensive. And they had to come in writing for the grant, talking about who the stakeholders were. And then there was expectations that it was actually going to be carried out. And so in these grants, I can just think of a few examples. They were working with barbershops. They were working with churches. They were working with all kinds of community foundations. They were working for advocates of the community. So be thinking about whatever you want to accomplish. Who else could be involved outside of the school or the early childhood program that could support the work? And just be open to maybe bringing some other folks in. This might be a great time to really get the community partnerships that you haven't had in the past. Maybe your SEA doesn't usually work like that. But this is your chance, I think. Things are transforming, things are opening up, and make use of that. And especially if you have funding to do so, how can you support it with your funds? Again, in consultation with your project officer. So any questions about these other considerations and what is possible? And I do want to, if you didn't happen to be on the director's webinar where Idaho shared, they are working with their library system in their state because their goal is to improve literacy for children with disabilities. And so it was a fantastic presentation and just gets you thinking, that folks are using libraries. They're already there. It's already about reading. It's already about literacy. What a fantastic partnership. So what other partnerships are possible? So any other questions about those first considerations before we get into the program measures? All right. So we do have two forums that could help you as you're thinking through your various program measures. And they are all on the program measures webpage. So it is new and I think much improved. And I'm going to say that is thanks to Anita Vermeer, Amito Solomon, and Kelsey Leib. And we also have support from a web designer who is doing a great job. So if you have other ideas, we can take those and run with them. I did see one thing, Kelsey, that we need to add, and that's the rubric for the new EBPD. So let's go ahead and start here. So if you go to SIG Network, I like to show people how to get there just in case you don't have the link on you. signetwork.org, and then go to the program measures page. And then you can see we now have a table of contents, thanks to all those people I just named. And from there, you can see there's an approximate timeline. We can include the real timeline since the packages just came out, the continuation directions or APR packages. And we have last year's slide presentation webinar recording, which we will replace with today's slides and recording. And then we have guidance for each of the program measures here, which we will take a look at. It's old guidance, could probably be updated at some point, but it is still appropriate. So these tools I'm talking about, rubric B, just provides you some questions to make sure that you're responding to in your APR. So you should have the year of your initiative at the top of the EBPD worksheet. Please don't forget to do that because it lets the external reviewers know how to look at it. And I'm just going to do an overview of all the program measures and then I'll get more in depth. And just a reminder and or information for those of you who are new, we have a contractor and they are called the Center to Improve Project Performance. And they do our Government Performance Results Act review of your program measures in your APR. They only look at that. They do not look at your project measures. They're just looking at your program measures or GAPR measures. And they are reporting to Congress how we're doing as a program. So each project's APR, they review for one initiative, and then we aggregate those data and provide it to Congress and say, this is how we're doing on professional development, improving implementation, sustaining implementation, and improving child outcomes. So we tell the story of our program using your data from your APR. But first, we have to have an impartial outside reviewer look at it, which is our contractor. And let me know if there are questions about that system. So they have this rubric as well. And so we're being transparent and sharing it with you. And we'll look at the worksheet in a moment, but you score your worksheet components from 1 to 4. And a score of 3 or 4 is considered it's in place. So that meets the requirement for that component. Program measure 2, improving implementation. So have you described a fidelity measure that notes the presence or absence of the core features of that practice? Have you set a target for the year that's being reported? And it is a little just, you should have already set the target a year before. If I see a target and the actual that are the same when that's a number like 39%, I wonder, like, was that really your target? You wanted 39%. So just be careful about setting the target the year before and then providing the actual. Did you talk about who are the participants you're measuring for fidelity? Is it a whole school? Is it a classroom? Is it by teacher? Who is the unit? What is the unit? And did you provide your target? And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about this, but you need to describe at a minimum 20% of those participants being observed for fidelity by someone other than the professional development participant. So say a school is implementing PBIS. You got an implementation team at the school level, the building level. So that implementation team is doing the BOQ, benchmarks of quality. And so that is a self-assessment. If you have their coach come in and then also do the BOQ for 20% of those schools and say, determine if they agree with those scores, you would describe that. If you had someone doing an outside measure for the fidelity measure, it's not a self-assessment, an outside measure, then you would not need to do this 20%. In addition to that, because things are still weird with COVID, you do not have to have that 20% reliability check this year. You didn't need it last year. You don't need it this year. We do expect to go back to it next year. If you have the data, however, please do provide them. We appreciate it, but we did want to continue to provide that flexibility because we know that we're still a little off in some states in terms of the ability to get into schools throughout schools and early childhood programs.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Selena. Is that for each initiative the school's implementing? So if they're implementing multiple initiatives with us at the same time, then we need to do the 20% for each initiative.
It's so it's for your program measure, for the improving implementation program measure.
Right.
So each of those, then yes,
Okay.
it would need
Right.
that check because you don't know. It's the requirement, and you don't know which one the contractor is going to choose to look at because they're just going to choose one of your initiatives and look at all those program measures for your initiative.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And I think we have a question in the chat as well.
All right. Do you want to read it to me?
Sure. Would we ever be able to get a glimpse of these reports, presentations to Congress? Just curious to see how this gets summarized and communicated.
Yeah, I could share the VPS report. I'm fairly sure it's publicly available. It's not very exciting, but I can ask if I can share it. I
Jennifer?
always share it out as slides to you all. And I already did that this year. So I take all the information, I put it on slides because I think it's prettier and easier to access that way. But you could also see the report, I would think.
I got it. Okay, thanks, Jennifer. That question was for me, Anna. Just the data nerd
Okay.
question.
Okay. And is my audio still okay, Kelsey?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, because everyone else is sounding a little off to me, which makes me think that my bandwidth is a little low. All right, so program measure 3 is ongoing technical assistance. So this is a confusing name and we need to change it at some point if anyone has a better idea for a name. But the big idea is that after your initial training, there are things that you do to continue to improve fidelity of whatever skills you were training on. You continue to do things to improve fidelity and to sustain fidelity. So what are those things? Is it coaching? Is it mentoring? Is it fidelity checks? Is it a just-in-time training about some aspect of that skill that people are having trouble with? Is it getting them to partner with other schools or sites to learn from each other? What are you doing to continue to improve fidelity and to sustain fidelity after the initial training? And how much money is being spent on that? So you're going to get to look at your overall spending for the cost of the professional development activities. And then within that, the cost of the ongoing TA for all those activities I just talked about. So you got the equation, which is the cost of the ongoing technical assistance, the coaching, mentoring, etc., is the numerator. The denominator is the cost of all professional development activities for that specific initiative. You set your target and then try to come within 5 percentage points of that target. We give you that flexibility because funding is a little, it's a little tough to nail down. And so we wanted to give you a little cushion for your target. Program measure 4, we now are calling it program measure 4. It might be confusing. Those of you who had an objective related to teacher, special education, teacher retention, we are no longer going to be reporting that for GEPRA. So you can still report the information, but you will not be reporting it for GEPRA. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second because it says my internet is unstable, and I'm going to close down a few things. And that is a great pause for you all to go ahead and lay any questions on me you have so far.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Earl Fold here, and we're in our last year, final year of our SPDAG, and we just got the package the other day, and in the first paragraph, towards the end, it says, for continuing state personnel development grant program grantees, you must submit your annual performance report to ED by May 6th. Okay. For grantees who will submit a final report prior to September 30th, you are not required to submit an annual performance report by May 6th. Please note the additional instruction for section C. So I just need some clarification. I think Julie's on this, our evaluator too, that this is our last year. So does that mean we don't have to do an APR, but we submit a final report by September 30th? And what's that final report then?
So
this is Anita. I'm
it
happy to
might
help
be-
answer, Jennifer.
yeah, great. I could hear Earl, but my computer is like varied, so I can start. And then Anita, if people are having trouble hearing me, you can round it out if you don't mind. So if you if you're going to spend all of your funds and provide us a final report by September 30th, you do not need to give us an annual performance report in May. I have found that often people think that they're going to be able to do that, but they can't. And I think it's easier just to give us a May report just in case, but it is up to you. You have that flexibility if you think you can spend down funds and provide the final report all by September 30th. So Anita, anything I didn't say about that you would like to share?
No, just, I'll just add to clarifying, if you have an end date of September 30th, and like Jennifer said, the likeliness is you have not spent all of your money and are ready to submit a final report. So you have to think that typically your final report will come 90 days after that end date, or 60 days after. Looks like Jennifer
I think
got
we have a
frozen.
couple of related questions in the chat as well. When was the APR package sent out, and will it be posted online?
We received ours in Ohio March 10th. Or, yeah, it says March 10th on ours.
I think our neighborhood is down, unfortunately. So I will do my best. Kelsey, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I think you may have cut out for just a moment there.
Yeah. We have multiple, we have 3 internet sources and they're all down right now. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. But if worse comes to worse, I don't know what we'll do. We'll continue another time. So just, Kelsey, I'm giving you permission to let me know when you cannot understand me.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And I'm also going to shut off my camera just to see if that helps at all. Okay, great. So does that sound better, Kelsey, with my camera off? Does it seem to make a difference?
It sounds about the same to me, but I could hear you pretty clearly before too.
Okay. Okay.
And
Well, then I'll turn my camera back on. Thank you. So the APR packages we will put up on SIG Network now, and also let your project officer know if you didn't receive it, and they will send it directly to you. And if you're listed as the project director, you should have received it. Maybe it went into junk, but we will definitely send it out to the entire listserv, and we'll also make it available on the SIG Network website on the program measures page. Thank you for telling us that. Okay. So good questions. These are all good questions. I'm very glad that you are sharing it with us. So we were looking at the rubric B, and I was talking about the fact that we are now calling the child outcomes measure program measure 4. And that is due to the fact that we dropped as a GEPRA measure the old program measure 4, which was highly qualified special education teacher retention. We just did not have enough grants who were using that measure, so it didn't make so much sense anymore. So we're now calling the child outcomes measure, which is our long-term measure, program measure 4. And keep in mind, if you are a 2017 grantee, this does not make a difference for you, because this is for the 2020s and 2021 grantees. And once we have our 2022 grantees, it'll also apply to them. So the child outcomes measure is for the newer grants, not the 2017s or 2016s if you still have a grant. All right. So we need to know what your child outcome measure is, such as an assessment of reading. You got to provide a target, you got to provide actual data once you have it, and then they'll know if you met your target or not. So it's pretty straightforward. You are setting your own targets for this one, and also determining your own child outcome measure, again, in conversation with your project officer. So if we go back to the SIG Network Program Measure page, you can see the APR fillable form. And again, thanks and kudos to Anita Vermeer, who updated this. Letitia Putney had put it together, but she updated it with the new Program Measure 4. You are not required to use this. This is something that project officers may use, and we thought it might be helpful for you to use as you're putting things together, but it's completely up to you. You could use rubric B instead. You can use neither. It is whatever is most helpful to you. So again, you might have multiple initiatives. If that's the case, say you have a literacy and a secondary transition initiative. So literacy might be number 1, secondary transition number 2. If you only have one initiative, one initiative. So here, which implementation year of the initiative are you in? Just because you were funded in 2020 doesn't mean you actually began your initiative at that time. So what initiative year are you in? And then what is your target for that year? And we set that target, and I'll show you that in a second. And then what actual percent scored a 3 or a 4 on that EBPD worksheet. And then same thing for if you have a second initiative. Program Measure 2, which is improving implementation, name the fidelity measure, and you might describe a little bit about what it does. Is it a self-assessment or outside observer tool? If you did a reliability check, which you have to do every other year, but not this year, did you check on 20%, or did somebody outside of the implementers do a 20% reliability check? Program Measure 3, which we call ongoing technical assistance. It's the funding that you do for things beyond the initial training that improve implementation and sustain it. So what does that look like for you? And then what's your target? And there's the equation. And then Program Measure 4, student outcomes. Again, what's your measure? What's your target, etc. And then what are your plans for sustainability with your participants? Are you helping them create a professional development plan for the years to come so that once you have completed your work, they will be able to continue to support it? There are many sustainability questions to ask as you start to work with different participants. So that's what could all be included in your plan for sustainability. What's your use of implementation teams? So these would both be, you could put them in a lot of places. Part C or Part C of your APR is one place. You could also have it in the executive summary, or it could be under, so it's, various places you could talk with your project officer about it, but what's easiest for both of you. But we would like to know about those 2 areas. And then kudos, this is just, as the project officer is looking it over, what do they see that they want to mention is really something praiseworthy, the questions they have, and items for further discussion. So again, this is not something that is required of you, but hopefully could be helpful as you're putting together your APR. All right, I'm going to go back to slides. So those are the 2 forms, and we got links here on the page as well as to the program measures page. So getting a little bit more in depth in Program Measure 1, evidence-based professional development. And just to note that these, multiple years, we have had more projects not receive a 3 or a 4 in these 2 areas than any others. So D3 is a component that is in the performance assessment area, and it's about sharing your data, your fidelity and your child outcome data regularly with stakeholders at multiple levels, which could be the SEA, the regional, the local, with individuals, with the community, with other agencies. So think about who you could be sharing your data with, and of course, why that's important. And then E2 is about the leadership at the various education levels, receiving data and feedback about barriers and successes. and making the necessary decisions and changes, including revising policies and procedures to alleviate barriers and facilitate implementation. So if you find this challenging because of how you're located in the state infrastructure, or who you're connected to that is a decision maker and is executive, please talk with your project officer about that and brainstorm things that you could be doing. And you might be doing things that you could describe in this section that you just haven't thought of that way before. Your project officer could give you ideas. So some things to think about with D3, describing the feedback loop that you use, and also describing how your fidelity data inform modifications to implementation drivers. So if fidelity is not improving, what are you going to change about your professional development? What needs to be changed about administrative support? Is leadership behind it and making things happen and helping make things happen? So if fidelity aren't improving, what needs to change by your implementation drivers? And describing that. E2, some considerations for this. And of course, I took this from the contractor, SIP. They made comments about if you didn't receive a 3 or a 4 when they scored you for the different components, they made comments about that. And so these are some of the comments that they made, that it was lacking a description of processes for collecting, analyzing, and utilizing data. It was lacking a description of changes to policies and procedures, lacking a sufficient description, or lacking a relevant description for E2. So just some things to keep in mind. Change these all to positive ways of looking at it and make sure you describe those processes, describe changes to policies and procedures, provide sufficient descriptions, and relevant. Make sure you're responding specifically to the requirements. Just a reminder that there is an exemplar worksheet from Georgia. They are a grant that it was from a grant that was finished a few years back, but the worksheet still stands. And I think we're going to have a new worksheet soon for you as an exemplar from a newer grant. Do use the appropriate evidence-based professional development worksheet. So the 2016-17 grantees would use the worksheet that's linked here, and it's very clearly marked on the program measures webpage. And then the 2020 and 2021 grantees would use this worksheet. And then have a novice review your worksheet, just to say, did we respond to all the requirements, all the bullets? Is there anything that's not clear? So this could be an intern or a doc student. This could be someone in your office who's new, who needs to get to know your program, or you could have another state review. So you can contact your project officer, say, we'd like another state to take a look at this, and we'll connect you. All right, so any questions about program measure 1? And I'm going to go ahead and while you are thinking about your questions, I'm going to use, actually, I will navigate to it to give you a reminder of where things live. So we've got for 2015, 16, 17 grantees. Here is the exemplar. Here is the rubric that it's based on, gives you ideas of what a 4 would look like. And then here's the worksheet with bullets. Oh, and because my internet's so slow, having problems right now. So these are what the bullets look like that you respond to over here. And then please do remember to add your initiative year at the top. And then we need to add, Kelsey, I keep meaning to tell you the rubric is not linked here. So we do have a new rubric that SIP helped us with, our contractor, and it describes what a 4 would look like since we have revised components here. You can see the requirements here, and you do give yourself a self-assessment score. The contractor doesn't take that into account at all, but your project officer will, because we'll look at what the contractor decided, we'll look at what you thought, And if they are really different, then we'll have a conversation about what might have been missing. All right, so questions about program measure 1 and the evidence-based professional development worksheet before we move on. So program measure 2 is about improving implementation. You can see the implementation drivers here. And the idea that we do all these implementation drivers so that we can change adult behaviors and have consistent implementation that lead to improved outcomes for children with disabilities. So some considerations about program measure 2, be clear about the fidelity measure you used. Ask yourself the question, how the reviewers know it's a fidelity measure. We talked about the self-assessment, the 20% external observation, and then thinking about how appropriate your targets are that you set for yourself, because each year you get to think about your target for that year in conversation with your project officer. Is it an appropriate target? Is it attainable, but still, it's going to stretch you? So think about your history and outcomes from other initiatives if you're having trouble setting your target. And again, they can be changed. So that reliability check, just a few reminders, it's only for fidelity measures that are self-assessments, should be conducted by someone not involved in the day-to-day work, and be real clear about that in your description under your data. So questions about program measure 2 before we move on. Program measure 3 is about sustaining implementation. This is our cost measure. I have an image there from CSEP about stages of implementation. And we're trying to get professional development participants to full implementation and to sustain that full implementation. And so that's why we think about coaching, mentoring, measuring fidelity, partnering them with others who are implementing, etc. Oops. I should ask for questions before I move on. So for program measure 3, we had talked about it earlier, so I don't want to linger on it too long, but any questions that you still have that I haven't covered when it comes to this cost measure?
I just have a quick question. You said that this is for the TA and coaching, the follow-up after initial training. What if we have a training series? So we have not just one initial training, but we've got multiple ones. Do the follow-up trainings, do they count as this, or is that still considered initial, like 4 different initial trainings?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It might help to think about the skills you are training to impart or to improve. So if it's a set of skills that you have already trained on that you're just working on improving implementation of, then it would be that you're supporting it afterwards. If it's a new skill in each training, those are all initial trainings. It's just a row of initial trainings.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good question. So program measure 4 is about improving child outcomes. And again, any project that started in 2020 or after, so 2020, 2021 projects. And right now you should be thinking about your baseline and your targets. So what's your measure going to be? What are the baseline and what are the targets? Now, so one thing I did forget to add here, for those grants who started in fiscal year 2020 or 2021, your fidelity measure needs to be the intervention related to the intervention that reaches the child. So you will still want to capture more implementation fidelity, such as like an MTSS rubric. So process kinds of things that you want to in place. You still want to capture that, but the measure that you are reporting on is really intervention fidelity now. And I think we're eventually going to change the name of it. But if you are working on literacy, how do you know what literacy instructional strategies are being used that should then improve child outcomes? So it shouldn't be new to 2020, 2021 grantees, because you responded to an application that specified that. And we've talked about it before, but it is a good reminder that we moved in that direction, because although the systems work, the process work you do is critical, you also need to know what is happening that would improve the child outcomes. And so we're trying to move people in that direction. I think eventually we will capture fidelity of both more that systems kind of level, and also in process, and also the intervention. So I think we'll do both eventually. But in the meantime, if you're a 2020 or 2021 grantee, you are describing a fidelity measure that gets at what is happening for the child.
And
And if
Jennifer,
you have questions about that, I can answer them now. Of course, the project officer can as well. Yes.
so that's in program measure 2, because program measure 3 is a budget. Did that change?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're right, you're right. I was looking at that and thinking of this. You're right, right. Yes, program measure 2. Sorry.
Okay, no, I just wanted to double check.
Yeah. Completely right. Hopefully I didn't absolutely confuse everyone. Other questions about improving implementation?
There's a question in the chat. It says, would classroom observation of PBIS practices work for PM2?
Yes. Yeah, I think again that, if it's happening in the classroom and the child is experiencing it, then it would work.
Jennifer, that was just sort of a forward-thinking question. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem. All right. Thanks, everyone. That was helpful. All right. So any final questions about the program measures before we talk about a few other things in your APR to be aware of? All right. So overall APR considerations, submitting your program measures. If you are a new project, you do need to submit all of your measures, not just your program measures, but also your project measures to your project officer, just to make sure you've got what you need to have in there before you submit your APR, because it's a lot tougher. Once you have it in G5, then we have to unsubmit and submit again. So we'd rather do it by email with an attachment. It's an iterative process when you're in your first year, and everyone goes through it. If you are not a first year grantee, then you will submit just your program measures to your project officer by April 15th for their review. Any questions about that? All right. So going back to the budget conversation, if you have a large available balance, when we check balances, probably in early May, you'll receive an email about that large available balance, also known as a lab. And then you'll have to complete an SF 424, which is a financial form, and it'll be part of your APR package in G5. If you are not notified, you do not need to include that form. And then, as we talked about before, just have a real strong description of the reasons you have not been able to spend down your funds. And even more important is your plans to spend down going forward, real specific about your activities, how much you plan to spend on them, and when would be very helpful for us. All right, so this concludes the what might be useful for everyone. And the next sections are going to be a little bit more basic for those who are new to the APR process. So any questions about all the material that I've shared so far?
And there's a question in the chat, are there changes to section C?
I don't believe so. Anita, do you know differently?
Not that I know of, but I can take a quick peek and see what I've read. And then the next question in the chat is, can you tell us who to contact if you haven't received it? And it's to your project officer.
Yep, contact your project officer. Thanks. Yeah, the reason it's important for your project officer to know that is because they need to check in G5 and just make sure that your correct email address is in there, that everything's working. Okey-doke, thanks. All right, for those of you who are staying on, welcome still. Annual performance report and final performance report are the two kinds of reports that you will turn in. Earl asked a question earlier about the final performance report. It's really your APR with just, you're just finishing out. You're including all of the data at that point in time. And then there are a few extra questions that you answer about the life of your project. So this is a cover sheet that you will be filling in G5. And I'm going to go somewhat quickly because we're nearing the end of our time. But the performance period that it's really a period of data collection. And so the period of data collection, if you're in your first year, it goes from the first day of your project to February 28th. If you are in the second through fifth year or sixth year, it starts March 1st and then goes through February 28th. You got your expenditures. If you said you were going to match any costs with non-federal funds, or not really a match, if you were going to provide some kind of non-federal funds to your grant and you talked about in your application, then you do need to report that here. So if you had a previous budget period, if you're not in year one, you share those numbers from last year. If you are in year one, you just do the current budget period. Make sure that it is signed by somebody other than yourself. Your authorized representative is listed in G5, and that is the person who should be signing it. You cannot be the project director and the authorized representative. You have to have those duties separated. So this is your executive summary. You're going to get to talk about all your successes, some of your challenges. Just give us a high level take on what has happened with your project in the last year. And then this is what the status charts look like. Hopefully you've seen them before. Real important to note is that there's an explanation of progress section down here. There are specific questions asked about your data, and they're great questions. Please do respond to them. So you enter your project objective and then your project or program measures. There is a great example of program and project measures from Idaho that's on the program measures page, and I really recommend taking a look at it. So make sure that you list it here as program or project. That's really important for both your project officer and the contractor to know what to look at. You either are doing raw numbers or you're doing ratio and percentage. Never, you don't need to do all of them together. So these are the questions and the explanation of progress. I was talking about these great questions to respond to. So describing the data, there's some information about that, any changes to the data, activities undertaken to achieve the targets. If targets are not met, what are the reasons? And how will you improve things if you didn't meet your target? So I think they're really good questions. All right. And then we talked about section B being that budget information that you share, and section C is where you talk about sustainability, implementation teams, any partnerships. And then there are a few other ideas for you in the directions that you receive with the continuation package. So section B, a little bit more information. And section C. So you're going to be in G5. If it's a final performance report, there are a few specific questions for that. If you have questions about your reporting periods, do contact your project officer with questions. So any final questions?
Jennifer, this isn't a question, but do you have any idea when the new proposals will be out for the SPDIG?
No, unfortunately, it takes some time to respond to comments.
Okay.
Because of all the, the offices, like the Office of General Counsel, et cetera, that need to be involved in that. So it's really time consuming when we have a notice of proposed priority. So unfortunately, no, but you do know that, that generally that we're probably going to have a new priority, right? That was proposed, and you know what the old notice looks like. And the old notice is based on IDA statute, and that doesn't change. The statute doesn't change. And it's based on the old, what we've gone out for comment for before and shared. So look at the old notice, know that you can be planning your activities right now, know that you should be reaching out to your partners and nailing things down. You can be doing all the legwork pretty much, knowing that you have the basic idea of what will be required.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? All right. Well, I apologize for the bandwidth issues. It's just a strange day, but I appreciate you all hanging in there and for the good questions. And thank you for your help, Anita and Kelsey. All right. Well, everyone have a good afternoon. Thanks.